What will happen when a smiling young woman, loved by thousands online, brings her beautiful horse to a fun countryside ride, but a single check from a vet reveals a dark secret? Behind the perfect pictures hides a truth so shocking, it sparks outrage, rescue, and a fight for justice. The story begins with a young woman named Margaret. She was 22 years old and lived in the peaceful English town of Kidderminster, not far from Birmingham. People in her town saw her as a kind and responsible horse owner. She had a beautiful 10-year-old horse named Atlas, who used to be a racehorse. Twice a week, Margaret would ride him through the countryside, and when she wasn't around, she kept him at a stable in the quiet village of Staunton. Margaret also loved social media. She often posted selfies with Atlas, hugging him, brushing him, or feeding him treats. In the photos, she looked happy. Atlas looked calm. To her followers, it was the perfect picture of love between a girl and her horse. People admired her and said things like, "She really loves that horse," or "Atlas is lucky to have her." Comments poured in with hearts and praise. Everyone believed Margaret was doing everything right. But sometimes photos only show what people want you to see. Behind those smiling pictures was a hidden story, one that would shock everyone. But no one knew the truth until one spring day in 2016. That day, Margaret received an invitation from the Bissell Wood Equestrian Center for a fun ride. It was a special event, a 7-mile ride through the beautiful countryside, and many horse lovers were planning to attend. People were especially excited to see Atlas, the famous horse from social media. Because of all the attention, Margaret was invited as a guest, so she didn't have to pay the entry fee. But there was one rule that applied to everyone. Every horse had to pass a vet check before the ride. This was to make sure the horses were healthy and safe for the journey. When the vet came to check Atlas, he noticed something odd. Atlas's hindquarters were covered with a thick exercise sheet. It wasn't unusual, as these sheets keep horses warm. But the way it was placed didn't seem right. So the vet told Margaret to remove the rug, but she shook her head. It was almost time for the ride to begin, and she didn't want any delays. "My horse is completely fine," she said quickly. But the vet wasn't convinced. Something about her answer didn't feel right. He could sense she was hiding something. So, he quietly reported the situation to the event organizer, a kind 74-year-old man named Bennett. When Bennett came to take a look at Atlas, he also felt that something seemed off. The horse looked tense, and the thick rug seemed out of place. But Atlas was the main attraction of the day, and people had come just to see him. Not wanting to create a scene, Bennett gave in and cleared Atlas for the ride. Margaret completed the ride without any trouble. She smiled proudly as she rode past cheering crowds. A photographer snapped photos of her and Atlas along the trail. Later, those photos were posted on Facebook. That's when the truth started to come out. People noticed how thin Atlas looked, even with the rug. Then someone found an older selfie of Margaret and Atlas with no covering. His ribs stuck out like sharp lines. His back looked sunken and weak. It didn't take long for animal lovers to start reporting Margaret to animal welfare groups. The photos of Atlas spread quickly on Facebook, and people were shocked by how thin and sick he looked. Soon, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, RSPCA, got involved. Inspector Debbie was assigned to the case, but not everyone believed Margaret was a cruel owner. Her social media still showed happy pictures of her with Atlas. She had fans and followers who defended her. Because of this, it wasn't easy for Debbie to take action right away. She needed solid proof. So Debbie went quietly to the stable where Atlas was kept. She took clear photos of his condition and collected a blood sample. The next day, she brought everything to a vet and waited for the results. When the vet called her, Debbie was stunned. She had seen many neglected animals in her career, but nothing like this. Atlas was given a body condition score of 0 out of 5, the worst score a horse could get. He was extremely underweight, weak, and malnourished. But that wasn't all. The vet also found a large sore on Atlas's back, exactly where the saddle would sit. This meant every time Margaret rode him, he was in pain. Still, she continued to ride him twice a week, smiling for photos as if nothing was wrong. Debbie was angry, but she stayed calm. Now she had proof. With her team, she returned to the stable. They arrested Margaret and rescued Atlas from her care. But Debbie wanted to know more. What caused Atlas's extreme weight loss? After more tests, the answer came. Atlas had a dangerously high worm egg count, something that happens when a horse isn't properly dewormed. It was completely preventable. A few simple treatments could have saved him from months of suffering. He didn't have to suffer like this, Debbie said. It could have been avoided. Margaret was charged with 2 crimes, causing unnecessary suffering and failing to protect her horse from illness and injury. In August 2016, she stood before Birmingham Magistrates' Court and pleaded guilty. While the legal process unfolded, Atlas's journey to recovery slowly began. His condition was so fragile that even basic treatments were risky. His body was weak, so weak that a single dose of deworming medicine could have done more harm than good. So, the caregivers took things slowly. They gave him soft food packed with nutrients, kept him warm, and let him rest in peace. Each small step was a victory. Inspector Debbie visited often. She watched him closely, hoping for progress. It was like watching a miracle, she later said. He started to gain weight, his coat looked shinier, and for the first time, his eyes had a little spark in them. After 5 long months of gentle care, Atlas finally grew strong enough to be treated for worms. The test results later showed a 0 worm egg count. The treatment had worked. Atlas was no longer fighting to survive. He was healing. Debbie gave credit to the Retraining of Racehorses charity, which paid for many of Atlas's medical bills. "We couldn't have done it without them," she said. And to the team that cared for him day and night, we called them Team Atlas. Every person who fed him, cleaned him, and loved him played a part in saving his life. Meanwhile, Margaret returned to court for her sentencing. The magistrates gave her 160 hours of unpaid community service. She was fined $500 for court costs and an extra $100 as a victim surcharge. Most importantly, she was banned from owning horses for 10 years. Bennett, the man who had organized the fun ride, also spoke out. "I was suspicious when Atlas arrived," he admitted, "but I didn't act. I was afraid if I raised an alarm, the crowd would panic. That was my mistake too. I'm just glad Margaret got what she deserved." As for Atlas, his transformation was nothing short of magical. He was no longer the skinny, broken horse from the photos. Now he ran freely across green fields, strong and full of life. His new caretakers described him as playful, gentle, and full of curiosity. And by the end of 2016, Atlas was adopted into a loving, forever home. "Atlas has done amazingly well," Debbie said. "He's living the life every horse deserves. When I watch him run now, it's hard to believe he was ever so close to death." This story is a reminder that behind smiles and pictures, pain can hide. But thanks to the people who paid attention and spoke up, Atlas got a second chance, one filled with love, care, and hope.